Okay, this is the first video of the theory. Now, as I said in the very, very first video, the overview video, remember, just watch the whole thing, read the whole thing, do all the exercises, even if you think you know, even if you actually do know these topics, I still want you to pay a lot of attention and copy if I ask you to copy. So, the sentence. What is the sentence in English? Remember, you can pause the video at any time, or you can also rewatch it at any time. So, what is the normal sentence pattern in English? The correct sentence pattern in English is we have a subject, we have a verb, we may have a complement, and we may have a modifier. So, here we have in the first sentence, we have John and I, so the subject, ate, so the verb, a pizza, that's the complement, the thing that we ate, and a modifier, when did we eat last night? So we have we, the subject, studied, then present perfect, we studied the topic of present perfect last week. So this is a normal sentence pattern in English. Every time I talk about full sentences, this is what I mean. A full sentence contains subject, verb, may have a complement, may have a modifier. Okay, so, what is the subject? I want you to copy this. Everything you see on the screen, copy. Pause, copy. A subject is something that every single sentence in English must have. If English is not your native language, maybe your native language has the possibility of lacking a subject in a full sentence. But this is an English language test, which means every single sentence must have a subject. Now, what is a subject? Well, if you already know, you know. You don't have to copy this part. You want to copy what you don't know. But how do we recognize the subject? Well, the subject is the one that performs the action of the verb. So when you say we ate pizza, when you say we ate pizza, right? So eating is the verb, so we, that's the subject because we are the ones that are eating pizza. And it also receives the action in the passive voice. So when you say the pizza was eaten, so when I say the pizza was eaten, this is in passive voice. So who was eating or what was eaten? Oh, the pizza in this case is receiving the action in passive voice. It usually precedes the verb, usually goes before the verb, emphasis on usually, and it may be a noun phrase, or a pronoun. We're going to see what that means in a moment. Well, not in a moment, but in following videos. And remember that every single sentence must have a subject. From here, copy what you need to copy. In this grammar section, you don't have to copy everything, just what I ask you to copy. There's a lot of things that you don't have to copy, because if you already know, you know. I don't have a problem with that, as long as you watch and read. Okay, so examples, you can see different examples. Coffee is delicious. So what is the thing that is delicious? Oh, the coffee, that new red car, that the whole thing is the subject. You can pause here, you can analyze the sentences, but every single underlined portion is the subject, because they are either performing the action, like in most of the sentences, or they are receiving the action, like in this passive voice. Has been broken. What has been broken? The window. The window is the subject because it's receiving the action in the passive voice form. Okay, moving on. Again, English always requires a subject, but some verbs don't take subject, right? Or some constructions just don't take subject. So this is where it and there come into place. So when we have the it is something that is used in the English language, which again may not appear in your native language, which is taking the position, the grammatical position of the subject, even though it's not really performing the action. So when you say it rains, the it is not really performing the action of the rain, right? You don't say rains. Who rains? What rain? Who performs the action of raining? Well, you could say that the sky is performing the action of raining, or you could say that the clouds are performing the action of raining, but there's really not anybody who's performing the action of raining, because raining just means water falling from the sky. But since English requires that there be a grammatical subject, that's why they create the, well, that's not why. Historically, there's another reason, but that's why we have the it. Again, in your language, you may not say it like this. You may not need a subject to explain the rain, but in English you do, and the it becomes the subject. Now, the same thing happens with there is, there are, in which there becomes a pseudo subject, which means it grammatically acts as a subject, syntactically, meaning in the position in which it appears is the subject. So when you say there was a fire, there is acting as a subject, so there's the subject, there's the verb, there's the theme, the complement, and there's the modifier. But if you think about it, the actual subject is the fire. The thing that we're describing that there is the fire. But grammatically, syntactically, there is the subject. Again, the SAT is not going to ask you which of the following is the subject, which of the following is not the subject. That's not what the SAT does. Why we are teaching you, well, what I am teaching you this is just so you can analyze the sentences, so we can actually apply the rules that the SAT requires. Okay, copy this if you need to copy. We're going to move on to the verb. Copy all. Now, I do want you to copy this. Again, sometimes, again, remember I say, please copy, and sometimes I say, copy if you feel like copying or if you feel like you need to copy. But if I say, please copy, you copy. So this is the thing I want you to copy. Every sentence in English must have a verb. Copy this because, again, this may not happen in your native language. How do we recognize the verb? It usually follows the subject. Emphasis on usually. It shows the action of the sentence. It usually shows the action of the sentence. Sometimes it's just describing, like a linking verb, like the verb to be. And it may be a single verb or a verb phrase. Again, don't worry, we're going to see what those are. Okay, copy if you have to copy. We're going to see some examples. When we say John drives too fast, then the action is driving, so that's the verb. When I say Josh is going to Miami, so is going, that's the verb. When we say has been fired, then has been is the verb, has gone is the verb. Those are the actions that, again, syntactically usually come after the subject. Now we go to the next. Complement. Please copy this. Not every sentence must have a complement. Remember, every sentence must have a subject, must have a verb, not necessarily a complement. Some verbs must have complements. This is case by case, right? So when you say I run, right? That's it. Subject, verb. I run. Full sentence. No problem. But when I say I call whom? Oh, I call my mom. Okay, now when I say I call, I need my mom, right? So some verbs require a complement, some verbs don't require a complement. This is case by case. Now, what is the complement? The complement is the thing that receives or completes the action of the verb. Again, when I say I call my mom, right? So I am the subject, call is the verb. Now, who is it that I'm calling? Oh, my mom, because it's receiving the action of calling. Again, the SAT will never ask you about this, but this is important because when we reach the topic of pronouns, you will have to differentiate a subject pronoun versus a complement pronoun, and the complement, the object pronoun, always receives the action of the verb. It generally forms the verb in active voice, meaning it syntactically goes after the verb. It cannot begin with a preposition and usually answers what or whom, like whom did I call, what did I eat, etc. Copy this if you have to copy, and we're going to move on. So some examples: John bought a cake. So what is the thing that they bought? A cake. Was driving a new car. She saw James. Important, very important thing. Remember that compliments can also be people, right? When you see James, or when I call my mom is a human being, but it can also act as a compliment. Okay, moving on. Modifier. Not every sentence must have a modifier, and unlike complements, in which some verbs require complements, verbs don't really require a modifier. I mean, in real life, some situations may require a modifier, but grammatically, syntactically, nobody requires a modifier. Copy this, and we're going to see what modifiers are. Well, they tell either time, place, or manner. Usually follows the complement. They usually go at the end of the sentence or at the very beginning of the sentence. Usually comes last, and they usually answer when, where, or how. Pause this and copy if you need to. And these are some examples of modifiers. So at the bookstore, so when, that's usually a prepositional phrase. So John bought a book at the bookstore. So John is the subject, bought is the verb, a book is the complement, at the bookstore is the modifier. So now you can have more than one modifier. Jim was swimming in the pool yesterday. So in the pool will be a modifier of place, and yesterday will be a modifier of time. So when and where. Well, where and where. And then she was driving very fast, which is a modifier of how, of mode. So how was she driving? Very fast. So this answers how, this answers where and when, and this answers where. Copy this if you have to copy. We're going to do the first exercise, subject, verb, complement, and modifier. Unlike the reading section, I'm not going to do a full explanation because, again, here we either follow the rules or we don't follow the rules. So there are no long explanations in the grammar section. So I want you to pause this video right here. I'm not going to pause. I want you to pause it. And I want you to do this, and then I'm going to show you the answers. I'm going to do the first one just as an example. What they're asking you to do is to separate these sentences and find the subject, verb, complement, and modifier. So I'm going to analyze the first one. So George will be the subject. Is cooking is going to be the verb. Remember, when you have a verb phrase, so is not the verb alone. I mean, it's not saying George is tall. It's saying George is cooking. That's a compound verb. So everything is the verb. Dinner will be the complement, and tonight will be the modifier of time. This is what I want you to do for all of this. Again, pause this, do it on your notebook, copy the answers, and I'm going to show you the answers. These are the answers. The first 5 answers. Pause, check. I'm going to follow. These are the last 5 answers. Pause the video, check, see how many correct you have. Now, after you have checked, just write down. I do want you to start keeping track of how many corrects you have. Write down, okay, if you have 5 correct, put 5 out of 10. If you have 7 correct, 7 out of 10. If you have 10 correct, put 10 out of 10. Check your mistakes, and we are going to move on. Now, things to consider for DSAT. DSAT doesn't really have a question that requires that you point the parts of the sentence. This is just an exercise that we do to prepare for further questions. So this is why there is no example of the real SAT here. But it does help you understand the roles of some words, and it helps you understand the rules on punctuation. This is a very important practice for the future. So when we start analyzing questions from the grammar section in the reading and writing, we are going to analyze things in terms of what is the subject, what is the verb, what is the complement, what is the modifier. Now, I don't require that you memorize those names, but you do have to know their roles. Okay, so this is the end of the first video, and we're gonna continue with the next topic.